What kind of mother gets turned away from a store when her child has nothing to eat? That question burned in Catherine Hale's chest as she stepped off the wooden porch of the dry goods store in Sheridan, Wyoming Territory, 1883. The wind came sharp from the Bighorn Mountains, full of dust and the warning of coming snow. She held her shawl tight with one hand and her empty basket with the other, her stomach aching from going without since yesterday. Her son had eaten only half a biscuit at dawn. She refused to beg, she refused to break, not in front of anyone. The shopkeeper had already turned his back on her. He didn't care about the look in her eyes. He didn't care that her boy was waiting at home, thin and hungry. He just said no credit and walked away. Catherine lifted her chin, even though her throat tightened. The hem of her dress dragged through the packed dirt. Her eyes stung, but she blinked fast and kept walking. She would not cry in the middle of town. She had held herself together for years, and she would hold herself together now. But someone was watching her. Across the street, a man leaned against a post outside the livery. His hat was low, his coat worn but clean, his boots scuffed from miles on the trail. He wasn't pretending not to see her. He looked right at her with steady eyes, the kind of eyes that saw more than most men cared to notice. "You got turned away for food?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Catherine froze. Shame rose fast in her chest, but she only gave a small nod and glanced toward her wagon. "I will figure something out." The man pushed off the post and stepped closer. "Come with me," he said. His tone was simple and sure. "I'll fill your table tonight." She hesitated, fingers tightening around the empty basket. "You do not even know me." "I do not need to," he said. "You got a child to feed. That is enough." Her gaze dropped to the dust between them as her breath caught. "I cannot take charity." "It is not charity," he said. "It is supper. Come on." Catherine looked up at him again, really looked. He had kind eyes, and a small crease near his mouth that looked like it once held a smile he forgot how to use. He seemed mid-30s, strong but quiet, in a way that made her feel steady just standing near him. She nodded. He gave a small nod back, then led her across the street to his horse, tied beside a muddy buckboard wagon. "Name's Silas Whitlow," he said, lifting the reins. "You can ride up front or follow behind." "Catherine Hale," she said as she climbed up, "my son is back at our place. It is just outside town by the creek." Silas flicked the reins. "Then, that is where we will go." The wagon creaked along the dirt road as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the land gold. The ride was quiet, but not heavy. Catherine watched his hands on the reins. Strong, steady, sure. She had not been near a man like that in a long time. They turned by the creek toward her homestead. The small cabin stood tired and worn, its roof patched with tar paper and hope. A boy stood on the porch, barefoot, thin, and watching with wide eyes. "That your boy?" Silas asked. "Yes, his name is Micah." "He is 7?" She nodded. Silas nodded too. "Look sharp." The wagon stopped. Catherine climbed down just as Micah ran into her arms. She held him tight. "We have a guest," she said gently. "He is going to help us tonight." Micah looked up at Silas. "You got food?" Silas smiled. "I got more than that." "You like rabbit stew?" Micah grinned big. "I do." Silas unloaded salt pork, beans, potatoes, flour, and even a good cut of venison. Catherine stared at the pile, breath catching. She wanted to speak, but Silas only said, "Let's cook." Inside the small kitchen, Catherine moved with practiced hands while Silas chopped vegetables. Micah watched them with hungry eyes as the warm smell of stew filled the cabin. Silas cooked like he had done it 1,000 times. "You cook like a ranch wife," Catherine said quietly. "I was raised on a ranch," he answered. "Ma died when I was 16. Learned what I had to." "Your father?" "Gone before I can remember." She stirred the stew. "Any family now?" "No, just me." She nodded. She didn't talk about her husband. He didn't ask. That silence held respect. Dinner brought warmth back to the cabin. Micah laughed for the first time in weeks. Afterward, Silas helped clear the table, then stepped outside. Catherine tucked her son into bed and joined him on the porch. "Thank you," she said softly. "Any time. You did not have to do this." "I wanted to." She stepped closer. "You are kind." "I do not know about that." "You are," she said. "It has been a long time since someone showed us kindness." He looked at her, the moonlight touching the edge of his jaw. "It does not have to be the last time." Catherine swallowed, hope rising in a slow, careful way. "You mean that?" "I do." "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "I will." She smiled, real and warm. "Good." He tipped his hat. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Silas." He rode away slow, looking back once before the bend. She stood there until his wagon disappeared into the dark. The next morning, frost covered the windows. Catherine stepped onto the porch, heart full in a way she hadn't felt in years. She waited, without admitting she was waiting. And when she finally heard his horse on the frozen road, her breath caught, soft and sure. He came back. Catherine wiped her hands on her apron as Silas rode up the lane. The morning was cold, the kind that made breath hang in the air like smoke. She stepped aside from the door, trying not to look as relieved as she felt. "You find your way all right?" she asked. "I did," he said. "Roads rougher past the creek, but the horse didn't mind." She nodded toward the door. "Come in if you're not in a rush." "I'm not in any particular one," he said, stepping inside and setting his hat near the hearth. Micah sat in the corner, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Catherine touched his shoulder. "You remember Mr. Whitlow?" "Yes, ma'am," Micah said, sitting up straight. Silas gave him a small nod. "Morning, son. You help your mama with the chores?" Micah nodded. "I carry wood. Feed the hens, too." "That's good work," Silas said. "Cabin this size doesn't run by itself." Quote, Catherine poured hot water into a basin. "There's fence down out back. A deer got through last week." "I can take a look if you've got spare wire," Silas offered, pulling off his coat. "There's some under the lean-to," she said, surprised at how natural it felt having him there. "I'll get started before the ground softens," he said. "Wind's sharp today." While he worked outside, Catherine stitched patches onto Micah's shirts. Every few minutes, she glanced out the window. Silas moved along the fence with quiet focus. He didn't talk to himself or swing his tools around like some men. He worked like every task mattered. By midday, the fence stood straight again. Silas came inside with dirt on his boots and a scrape on his arm he acted like he didn't feel. "You get it fixed?" Catherine asked. He nodded once, strong for now. She handed him a plate with biscuits and slices of ham. He sat near the fire, stretching his legs. "You've got a good piece of land here," he said. "Water runs clear, trees for shelter." "It was my husband's," she said. "We came from Kansas 5 years ago. He built most of it." Silas didn't speak for a moment. "He pass here?" She nodded. 2 winters ago. Fever took him fast." Quiet settled between them. Not cold, just true. "My mother's buried near Laramie," he said. She liked the wind there. Catherine glanced up. "You stayed long?" "A few years," he said. "Took work where I could. Never stayed long anywhere." "You planning to stay now?" He looked at her. "Is there a reason I shouldn't?" She shook her head. "No reason at all." He stood and brushed crumbs from his hands. "I'll ride into town. Bring nails and salt if you're low. Anything else?" Quote. She hesitated. "Window glass if you can find any. The back pane is cracked." "I'll look," he said. "I'll be back before dusk." "You don't owe us anything," she said softly. "I know," he said. "That's not the reason I'm coming back." Before he left, she reached up without thinking and brushed a bit of dust from his collar. He froze for a moment, then smiled small. "I'll be here," she said. He tipped his head and rode off. By late afternoon, he returned with a crate tucked under his arm. "Found the glass," he said. "Traded for it." She took the crate carefully. "Thank you." Micah came rushing out. "I brought in the kindling!" "You haul it yourself?" Silas asked. "Yes, sir." "Next time, tie the sack so it doesn't snag," Silas said. "I will," Micah said, darting back inside. Catherine leaned against the doorframe. "You teach children well." "Not often," he said, "but I remember what I needed at that age." The wind tugged at her shawl. She tucked it closer. "You work with leather?" "I do," he said. "Why?" "There's an old harness cracked behind the shed. I'd trade a jar of plum preserves if you'd look at it." "Preserves or no, I'll look," he said. "Then you'll eat with us tonight," she said. He hung his hat on the hook beside the door. He didn't need to say yes. That evening they ate stew by lamplight. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the kind that warmed the room. After the dishes were done, Catherine mended clothes while Silas worked on the harness. He cut new straps clean and careful. The fire crackled. Snow tapped softly against the pane. "You ever think of settling somewhere for good?" she asked. "I did once," he said. "North of Cheyenne. Man who owned the land ran out of money. Lost the place." She nodded, her voice low. "Life has a way of taking things." "Yes," he said, "but sometimes it gives things back." She looked at him. "You planning to leave when the weather clears?" He paused. "I was thinking about staying a while longer, if that's something you'd want." Her breath trembled. "There's room here," she said. "Room for someone who works hard and keeps his word." He met her eyes. "And someone who's made mistakes?" "We all have," she said. "It's what you do after that." He reached out slowly and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. The fire glowed warm across the cabin floor. Snow drifted outside. Inside, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It felt like something new was building between them. He stayed that night, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because she asked, and because he wanted to. By morning, the storm had thickened. Snow pressed against the windows, and the world outside had gone quiet and white. Catherine kneaded dough at the table. Micah carved a stick by the fire. Silas split logs with slow, steady strikes that echoed through the small room. "You ever think about building something again?" she asked softly. "Not a place. A life." He set another log down. "I've thought about it more since I met you, since I met him." He nodded toward Micah. The warmth in her chest felt like a rising sun. "Silas," she said, voice low. "What do you want?" He stepped close. "I want to stay, if you'll have me." She lifted her gaze and held his eyes steady. "Then stay." He reached for her hand. She took it without fear. Outside, snow covered the world in white silence. Inside, they had begun something new. The storm broke at sunrise, leaving the world covered in a clean white hush. The snow lay smooth across the fields, soft as wool and bright under the pale sky. Catherine stood at the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup, watching the breath of winter drift slow across the land. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, filling the room with steady heat. Micah carved little notches into his wooden bird, his brow tight with focus. On the other side of the room, Silas checked the new roofline through the frosted window, making sure the snow was not piling uneven. His shoulders were broad beneath his shirt, and his movements were sure, the way a man moved when he had something worth staying for. "You always this quiet when the weather turns good?" he asked without looking away from the pane. Catherine smiled softly. "I listen better when the world stops shouting." He turned toward her. "Then you must have been listening a long time." She didn't answer at first. She just set her cup down, wiped her hands on her apron, and moved toward him. Her steps were slow but certain. "You ever think about what comes next?" He drew a slow breath. "I didn't used to. I lived from sunrise to sunrise. No plan, no place to land. And now, quote." He glanced at Micah, who was humming under his breath while he carved. "Now I see something worth planning for." Catherine swallowed, her heart warm and full. "I was afraid to hope for that." "You don't need to be afraid of me," he said. "Not ever." She stepped even closer then, close enough to feel the heat from his body, close enough to see the small crease near his mouth that softened when he looked at her. He reached for her hand, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "There's a life here," she whispered, "one I fought hard for." I won't risk it on someone who might walk off when the snow melts." "I'm not walking off," he said. "Not from you, not from him." His eyes flicked to Micah again. "Not from this land." Her breath trembled. "Then say it plain." He squeezed her hand. "I want to stay. I want to build something with you, something that lasts." Her answer came in a whisper that warmed the whole room. "Then, stay." Micah looked up just long enough to grin. "I knew you would." Weeks passed, and winter settled deep around them. Silas repaired the old harness, patched the roof, fixed the fence line, and helped Micah learn how to set traps along the creek. Catherine mended clothes and baked bread, and she found herself humming again, something she hadn't done since before her husband died. Sometimes at night, she and Silas sat by the fire while Micah slept, talking soft about small things that felt big. She learned that he liked quiet mornings and the smell of fresh-cut pine. He learned she loved the old cottonwood tree near the creek because its branches reminded her of her mother's hands. When spring came, the land thawed slow but sure. Silas planted corn with Catherine, teaching Micah how to mark rows with twine. He brought home scrap lumber and built a new chicken coop with the boy, showing him how to measure twice and cut once. The cabin changed too. A fresh coat of tar sealed the roof, shelves filled with jars and sacks. A second-hand rocking chair sat by the hearth. One warm morning, Micah tugged on Catherine's skirt. "Is he staying forever?" Quote. Catherine looked out the window where Silas was splitting logs. His shirt was rolled to his elbows, his face easy, his hands steady. "Yes," she said. "He is." In June, they were married beneath the cottonwoods by the creek. The preacher rode out from town, and Catherine wore her mother's brooch pinned at her collar. Silas stood tall, dressed in his cleanest shirt, with Micah holding the ring made from a silver coin he had carried for years. They shared a meal afterward at the table Silas had built with his own hands. Bread Catherine baked, jam Micah helped preserve. There wasn't music, but they danced anyway, barefoot in the dirt, under the open sky. Life thickened around them after that. Not perfect, not easy, but real. By the next winter, Micah had grown taller and stronger. He called Silas Pa without hesitation. The cabin held warmth even in the coldest months. And Catherine no longer worried about empty baskets or turned-away doors. Some nights, when the stars hung low and the world felt safe, she sat beside Silas on the porch. He held her hand in his, thumb brushing gently against her skin. "You still glad you stayed?" she asked once. He looked out at the creek, the cottonwoods, the small home glowing warm behind them. "Every sunrise," he said. Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "So am I." He kissed her temple, soft and certain, and for the first time in years, Catherine felt something she thought she had lost forever. She felt full. She felt seen. She felt home.